Sri Lanka Crisis and Recovery. How did Sri Lanka become bankrupt? I am Shanti Mendis. This video series provides information to the general public about the roots of the national crisis in Sri Lanka. The second video is on how Sri Lanka became bankrupt. The information for the video series is taken from Sri Lanka Tears and Dreams of a Fragile Democracy, a book that was published by me in 2022. If you look at it in a simplified form, the three main determinants of an economy are total production, total income, and total expenses. Budget deficit or deficit between government revenue and government expenditure. How does this happen? In Sri Lanka, foreign exchange earnings come from remittances sent by Sri Lankans working abroad, tourism and garment industry, and export of tea and other agricultural products. Sri Lanka imports many things: machinery, electrical, mechanical equipment, pharmaceuticals, vehicles, food, fuel, textiles, etc. Since 2014, Sri Lanka has imported 40% more than its exports, and this is a problem. Inadequate production of tradable goods and services has resulted in an import-dependent economy with a trade deficit and a budget deficit. This graph shows how the gross domestic product per capita in Sri Lanka increased over the last 60 odd years, but the gross domestic product, which was 3,999 in 2021, dropped to 3,343 in 2022 due to misgovernance of the economy. Why did the economy collapse? There are many reasons. Some of them are short-sighted economic strategies during the Gotabaya Rajapaksa regime, reckless borrowing for non-productive projects during the Mahinda Rajapaksa regime, central bank's mishandling of the economy, expenditure in excess of income that the government earned from taxes, exports, and other revenues. The COVID-19 pandemic contributed, and fraud, corruption, and waste also contributed to the collapse of the economy. Over the years, there has been reckless borrowing and spending to implement the ruling party's agenda. As a result, public debt was more than the gross domestic product since 2020. In 2020, it was 100.6%. By 2021, it has risen further to 104.6%. There are many examples of short-sighted policies during the Gotabaya Rajapaksa regime. During this time, the economy was also mismanaged by the central bank. Examples of short-sighted policies include tax reductions and deductions and removals, like the value-added tax, the capital gains tax on the stock market, etc. Prohibition of pesticides and chemical fertilizers. Agricultural production fell by 50% as a result. $450 million worth of rice had to be imported to the country. There was an 18% decline in tea production. During this time, there was an increase in military spending and the defense budget went up to $1.7 billion. You can see that in this graph, and this is an expenditure that the country cannot afford. Inflation, on the other hand, rose to 70% by September 2022, and this is an unprecedented inflation rate. Countries hold reserves for a number of reasons, including economic shocks, paying for imports, servicing debt, and moderating the value of currencies. What happened to the reserves in Sri Lanka? Foreign reserves in 2019, we had only $8.8 billion. And as you can see from this graph, by 2022, it fell drastically to 2.3 billion in January 2022, and as of March 2022, Sri Lanka's reserves were only 1.93 billion, which was not enough to cover 1 month's imports into the country. So this was misgovernance of the economy. The debt burden, on the other hand, increased, and in June 2024, as you can see from this graph, it has risen to $93.37 billion. 57% of these loans are domestic loans, 37% are foreign loans, and 15% are commercial loans. Domestic debt can be serviced in local currency, while foreign debt has to be repaid in foreign currency. Foreign currency must be earned from foreign income, from exports, or new foreign borrowing. So the economic crisis was precipitated by the following factors: misgovernance of the economy by successive governments, but particularly Gotabaya and Mahinda Rajapaksa governments. Lack of economic discipline widened the gap between national expenditure and income, and lack of development created an import-dependent economy. Reduction in foreign exchange earnings from exports and remittances, excessive foreign currency debt, and an increase in foreign exchange outflows due to rising prices of fuel and food items. Low income from tourism during the COVID-19 pandemic also contributed to a certain extent. Depletion of foreign reserves resulted in a decline in the country's ability to meet external debt service obligations. And in April 2022, the then Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa announced that the Sri Lankan government would default on its debt. Sadly, this is the first time in Sri Lanka's history that this has happened since independence in 1948. In November 2023, Sri Lanka's Supreme Court delivered a symbolic verdict finding the following people guilty of triggering the island's worst financial crisis by mismanaging the economy. Former Presidents Gotabaya and Mahinda Rajapaksa, former Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa, and 2 former central bank governors were among the 11 officials responsible for the financial crisis. Now, we need a strong government which can develop the country and develop an export-oriented economy. Thank you.